On the 20th of January, President Biden gave his inaugural speech to the nation as the president. And in his speech, he addressed a topic that has been pervasive in American history since its inception, and that's white supremacy. In his speech, it was the first time I can recall a president speaking about white supremacy at that specific time in history, after just being inaugurated and talking about this issue. In and of itself is historic, because ultimately how white supremacy works is almost like Fight Club. The first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. Well, same thing with white supremacy. The first rule of white supremacy is you don't talk about white supremacy. But today I'm going to talk about white supremacy. And if you talk about white supremacy, you have to understand how it is perpetuated in our country. The first thing that you have to talk about with supremacy is iconography, image and imagery, things that are portrayed to you to show you that something is superior. This in American history is so ingrained into our society that when you talk about it, it becomes contentious. A good example would be the statues honoring the Civil War Confederates, the bases honoring traitors to the Union. Because when you name something after someone, it signifies an honor or a distinction that makes them elevated, and then their cause becomes elevated. Because it was about states' rights, it wasn't about owning people like cattle or chattel. It wasn't about that. It was about freedom. No, that's a lie. So the iconography supports their cause. So when we remove the statue, the iconography can be taken away. And that's not a small thing. It's not a small thing to remove iconography. Like when you want to plant in a garden, you must first remove the fallow ground, the thing that is the anathema, and then you have to replace it with something that is good. So iconography and supremacy are interrelated. This has nothing to do with American history. This goes back until the Bible times. It goes back until the Roman times. It goes back as far as mankind can know, when they first had that golden calf and they worshiped it. Iconography and supremacy are unique. It goes back to when the Catholic Church determined that the image of Christ would not look historical. That's because iconography and supremacy are interconnected and related so closely that if you remove the iconography, then the supremacy falls away. Now, what do we know about black iconography in American history? That is the key point. Because black iconography in American history is often overlooked. It was just a few years ago that Martin Luther King got a monument on the National Mall. But look further. Where do you see Martin Luther King boulevards in every city? It's in the worst part of the city. It's in the most, run down part. But if you look at some of the streets, it's like, well, why is Jefferson Davis Highway in the best part of Route 1 in Virginia? Because the iconography is to show you what is associated with the function of the thing that's being portrayed, and that has to be removed so you can ultimately restore an image of that is appropriate to the level. And ultimately, when we talk about iconography, the historical context of it is so significant. If you go back into Egyptology and you find out that the statues on the pyramids, why was the nose chopped off? Well, the nose was chopped off because iconography is so powerful, because it couldn't show what the people looked like at that time. They had big noses. Some people have big noses too. It's no biggie. But the issue that we have to talk about and how we fix it, it starts with identifying the iconography, and then we can replace it and keep the historical context. People talk about, well, we're going to lose our history. I'm like, no, that's a lie. Because when we went to Iraq and we took down the statue of Saddam, nobody in Iraq was saying we're going to lose our history. When the British, we took down the statues of King George, nobody talked about we're losing our history. That's a lie. It's disingenuous. You can keep it in a cemetery. You can keep it in a museum. It doesn't need to be a public display, because that iconography and supremacy is so interconnected. So when Biden talked about it, it was essential that he said it as the highest elected official in our land. Thank you for your time.